Hotepu Gatekeepers. This video is about not being a fool in love. And what makes you a fool is that you're not wise. So if you want to stop making a fool of yourself in relationships, of losing yourself, of becoming resentful and bitter, then you must replace being a fool with being wise. Now, in order to become wise, you have to look at the laws of relationships. Everything in nature is run by laws. Every budding leaf, every sunrise, every cell in your body are run by laws. There are rules. And the question is, where are these rules to be found? People often say, there's no manual for love. There's no manual for this. So how do you know? Well, there's no manual for the white culture. That does not mean it's not true, that it's true for everyone else. Other cultures do have manuals. And we need to look now to these cultures to see what the ancient sages said about this phenomenon, this mystery called love. First of all, let's understand that in the white cultural arc, which began basically with the Greeks, love has not been the same thing. Pretty much between the rise of the Greek white nations and about the 1400s in the modern era, love was basically not a romantic phenomenon. It was more so arranged marriages. It was more so of a contract where the families were involved and the social and economic and political dynamics of that bond were considered very seriously. There were dowries often involved, and there are a few stories in white literature back in those days of romantic love, like with Achilles, who was in love with a man actually. They call it his cousin, but it was actually his lover. So there are stories of that, but it wasn't the predominant norm until about the 1400s, when, particularly in France, the troubadours became popular. They were basically the modern Michael Jacksons of France that went around with their guitar and their dance moves to parties of rich people singing love songs to the pretty ladies. And it was during that time we had the rise of this romantic view of love, where love should be between the two people, not involving the families and dowries. It should be two lovers, star smitten, and then we had the rise of these stories like Tristan and Isolde, and then of course the story of Romeo and Juliet. And it was at that window of time in the white cultural arc that what we now call love, this romantic view of love, became the norm, and it spread through Europe and has stuck. Okay, so that's just to give you a tiny historical overview that in the white culture, much like marriage, love has been redefined over the centuries. So that is the white people's view of it, and we shouldn't look at the white culture for relationships, because the evidence proves they have no idea what they are doing. They have no historical backing to stand up and say, we can tell the world about love, because the divorce rate is over 50%. Most numbers say it's close to 70%. If you account for divorces, annulments, abandonments, it becomes about 70%. That's a very low success rate. So if you had an investment that only worked 70% of the time, that's not a hot investment. So because the white people are ruled by a god we call the war god, we call Herkohuti, which is owned by Ares, the ram of Ares, which you see here, these horns. Here is Ares. It is the opposite of Libra, the scales. So here we have in this image Ares, independence, ruled by Mars, the god of war, and Libra, Venus, ruled by Venus, partnership. They're opposite each other, 180 degrees from the other. So that lets us know that the white people who have risen to power historically through war and conquest, which would be Aries, don't have an idea about the opposite mystery, which is relationships. So let us not look to white people for this. Let us look to other cultures. And this is the beginning of you becoming wise, by you knowing from whom to get counsel on important life issues. Okay, now, in the Golden Beetle, I'll be doing a series of YouTubes making public a part of our teachings about how to become wise by looking at the skies. How to become wise by looking at the skies. And by the skies I mean the teachings of the eternal zodiac, which is shown here. This is what's called the natural or the pure zodiac. And it is what we call a granary, a glittery, starry granary, whose grains are the twinkling lights of the sky, the stars. And the zodiac is actually a storehouse of information and knowledge of human cultures from millennia. And if you learn how to read it, it can decode the deepest mysteries of all things. In fact, the natural zodiac, which simply means the first sign is always the ram, the second is the bull, the third is the twins, going around in this locked sequence until you end with the fish. If you stay with this sequence and you study it, there's nothing else to study in life. This is the gestalt of knowledge. This is the grand unified field dynamic that explains all things in life if you know how to decode it. And that's why, despite attacks by white scientists and white religions, and also the religions of Islam attacking the sciences of the blacks, the zodiac, that it still survives. It's still here because it is true. It contains truths. Wisdom cannot be destroyed by any evil. So with all that said, as an intro, let's really begin to help you to understand how to look for the source of wisdom about relationships. And we start up here with this very sexy figure of this sign of Libra. This beautiful man holding the scales of Libra. And I'm going to initiate you into how to decode all of these secrets of the natural zodiac. First of all, let's start with what's on the tray, what's in front of us. The symbol for Libra is scales. You see it here. You see it here in white, here, and that's the actual astrology symbol again, here. So, first of all, the ancients, because the Africans were the first to develop the calendar and the zodiac. If you study the Ishango bone from 90,000 BC, you study Nabta Playa in southern Egypt from about 16,000 BC, and then you study the Deacon clock and the Dendera zodiac of Kemet, you will see that the Africans were long involved in the study of stars and calendars. And even our calendar today, our Julian calendar, came straight out of Africa. It came straight out of the Nile Valley of Kemet. We still use it. It is so efficient. So these blacks said that relationships are self-similar to scales. Now that's radical to modern troubadour, love song, Michael Jackson singing, "Ooh, baby, baby, I love you," or whatever these singers are expectorating. Scales, number one, are a man-made thing. You don't find them growing in nature. That's significant. Marriage and partnership, and we're talking about relationships between adults. The scales of Libra, the scales of this sign, deal with how is one to relate to an adult one-on-one. To answer it, you look at the mysteries of this sign. So first of all, it is a man-made object. This is saying that for humans, the laws and dynamics of mature relationships are not based upon organic feelings. It's based upon a construct, what's called a social contract, an agreement. That's why the scales owns contracts between you and your a renter, and if you are a homeowner, etc. A contract. A contract is an agreed upon man-made set of conditions that both parties agree of their own free will to abide by. So if you're walking into a relationship with a man thinking it should be based upon some kind of organic natural feelings, you're already a fool. You're already in trouble. Because you have to look at this objectively. You see, the scales are an air sign. That's the next clue. Air means intelligence, intellect, logic. You have to go into a relationship not emotionally, but get ready for this, it's horrifying to modern white culture, with your head on your shoulders. You have to go into this thing rationally. So you have to bring scales, which is an agreement. And many of you may say, oh, well, that's so unromantic. But we'll see if that's so true. We'll see that in the end, despite this romance talk, the scales still are the way we really do relationships. The ancients had it right, despite people trying to pretend it's changed. So what are scales for? Scales are for measuring. And to measure, you need the air element, or intelligence. Air also is objectivity. It allows you to step away through mental observation from a situation to analyze it. So, you have to weigh and measure something in people. Well, what are you weighing and measuring? The contract. Every person, when they walk into a relationship, has what I call the hidden contract. There are certain do's and don'ts that you need in order for you to stay with someone. In other words, relationships are not the mystery of unconditional love. Absolutely not. It is a measure of balance between the contract agreement and the contract breaching. So what happens in relationships in the white culture, and I'm also including black people, Asian people, Native American people, whomever, follow the white pattern. The whites wrote this pattern, but many people of color follow it foolishly. So that's who I'm speaking to. That if you follow that malarkey of love and romance and chemistry, when you actually get involved in a relationship and ask people you know around you, if you're not one of them, who have been involved seriously for a long period of time, you learn quickly that you had a contract, you had rules, do's and don'ts. And as soon as the person broke one of your rules or crossed a line with you, boom, the scales within you began tipping. You were very aware of the imbalance being struck, that something wrong is happening here. And sometimes you'll hold it in, sometimes you'll ignore it, kind of. Sometimes you try to overlook it, but it's still registered like a tick mark in an accountant's book. And the person does something else a week later, and boom, that's now 2. You're counting. Scales are about math, right? Measuring. And then a year passes and they say some other rude thing to you. Boom! 3 ticks. 3 minus signs. And you slowly start doing math. And eventually you say, you know what? I'm done with you because you're ridiculous. So despite all the romance, flowery language we say about love, in reality, you are measuring and you are judging. Scales are for judges. The scales of law, the scales of justice. And it's best to leave the white malarkey alone and follow the natural zodiac's message. So instead of Walking in, falling in love. Falling always hurts. Who wants to fall? Despite falling in love and scraping your knees and busting your face open for love, why don't you just follow what the Africans are telling you? Enter it with logic in your spirit. People often look at things to measure. How handsome is he? How much money does he make or does not make? How important is he? What's his status? Does he take care of his hygiene? Does he know how to respond to my feelings? You have a list of things that you're going to judge him on once you engage him in a relationship or a bond, one-on-one. Then your mind is saying, okay, well, I have my ideal cuteness index, and you know he's about a 6 or 7. See, that's a measure. You just judged and measured. So stop playing games and pretending you're not doing this. We're all doing it in relationships. The danger comes in when you don't know your own criteria. You don't know it in a conscious way, and you don't share it. You see, these scales mean man A comes to the table saying, here's my half of requirements. Here's my contract. Here's my list of do's and don'ts. And within these do's and don'ts, some are non-negotiable and deal breakers, and some I can negotiate with you on, like a contract. And then the other man says, well, here is my contract. Here's my needs, my taboos, my do's and don'ts. Once you have two separate parties coming consciously together to the table with the love contract, now you have something to work with. You see, in Egypt the word for love is meri or amari, where the word amor comes from in the Romance languages. Romance languages, interesting, and yes, romance. So the word meri is shown as a tool for tilling the soil. It's a kind of pick for tilling the soil to plant seeds. It is a tool of manual agricultural labor. It's a hoe and a pick. You see? That's the word for love. Meaning it is work. It is a seeding and a tending process. It is not, there's nothing emotional about planting seeds. It's pretty much scientific, air element, logical. So when you have two men coming together saying, I like you, we should discuss this relationship going further. I have a list of things that are important for me, as I'm sure you have a list of things that are important for you. Let's, like mature, rational adults, not love-struck teenagers, look at our lists, discuss them, and may this set of lists become our commitment to work on together in a compromising way. So now you come clean. You come to the table knowing what to expect. There's no surprise. Like a contract between you and Verizon. You know exactly what to expect because you read the contract. You know the consequences of breaking those bullets in the contract. This sounds weird to white culture. It doesn't change tea in China. It's still the way it works, because even when you're involved, you start counting offenses. You start counting how many times did he bring me roses, how many times did he not bring me roses, how many times did he forget my birthday, how many times did he say I'm sorry, how many times did he hug me that right way. You're counting. You're weighing and measuring. Math scales are for math, for numbers. And all I'm saying is, let's finally, as a gay community, be honest about what's really going on. Because I don't want to see my brothers going through heartache and depression that comes after a breakup, and the kind of sickness that happens when the heart's broken, and the evil that ensues from people's spirits when they're wrecked in love. I don't want to see that, and that's where this video is coming from. To help my community to come back to the ancient African understanding of these mysteries. To help them. So why don't you try it? Why don't you at least try throwing the 70, who knows, 80% failure rate of the white understanding of love, get rid of that crappy investment, that crappy stock, with this ridiculous ROI, return on investment. Try another kind of stock, another kind of perspective, and see how that works. Stop being a fool in love. So, now once each party has these contracts, the agreement becomes, okay, I agree to work with you, my future partner. One by one, I may have to adjust some of my behavior. I may have to grow in certain ways. You will have to grow in certain ways and adjust your behavior. And we have to start compromising to make these contracts work. You see that? You see how mature that is? Then, once you commit to signing the contract and working it through, now you start discovering intimacy. Because that's going to hurt. That's going to challenge you. It's going to push your buttons. It's going to force you to grow, which is a thing adults should do. So there are going to be times, certain weeks, months, days, years, when you don't feel like respecting your partner's contract. Well, what do adults do? They say, well, I'm having a hard time today with that, but because I'm committed to you in a mature, non-childish way, I'm going to work it through. I'm going to use my spiritual powers of meditation and ritual and self-improvement, because I saw you working last week on these things and you didn't want to do it, but I saw you, and I was touched, of course, by your willingness to change and grow and expand yourself a little bit to make me feel a little bit better. I appreciate that. So I'm going to return that favor. You see the scales back and forth of fairness now? Now we're talking about justice and fairness objectively, air element, objectively. So when you see your partner bending and trying to work your contract out, it moves you to return the favor, to reciprocate. That's why it's a scale of reciprocation. You understand? So few astrologers understand this dynamic of the obvious symbology of this star sign. Oh, compromise and give and take. Well, to compromise, you have to have a contract first to know exactly what is required of you. And I've had people in the years of my teaching whom I've taught this to come out of this with very wise understanding of relationships now. Because many of you think your partner should be a telepath. They're supposed to read your mind and know what you need and know what you're expecting in this moment without you communicating it. Air signs, which Libra is the sign of open your mouth and say something. Communicate skillfully. Some of you have no understanding of the signs of effective communication, which means your air element is dysfunctional. It is deranged. There are laws to communication. There's a way to communicate. There's an etiquette to it. The Libra scales own etiquette itself. They own manners. Because manners are ways of saying, I respect your feelings. So I won't just speak to you any old way and treat you any old way. I'm going to respect that you have feelings and that you have a ka. So I'm going to honor the scales of etiquette and say what I have to say to you in a respectful and clear way. You see, we're already far in advance from the white people's view of love. Okay, now, we have come to the table as two mature adults with a contract of expectations, understanding that your partner's not going to be some telepath who's supposed to read your mind and know what you're needing and wanting in this moment. You have to tell them, this is what I need, this is what I would like to have. You could even say, I would like it better in this way of presentation. Can you wrap that up for me in a certain way, that gift? That's okay to say to someone. You see? Now, there's more to the story. There are things, we're going to go down here to this green area of the scales. There are things that we have in our Golden Beetle astrology system that are called vitamins and triggers. You look at the sign of the scales. Number one, it's owned by the planet Bennu Osar, what the Greeks called Venus, but we don't call it Venus. We call it Bennu Osar. Bennu means phoenix bird or resurrection, and Osar means my divine DNA. So the word Venus to the blacks of the Nile Valley mean resurrection of my highest, most pure divine DNA habits. Okay, that's a very different understanding of Venus, who was some white woman with, her breasts hanging out on a clamshell or something. It's a very different understanding. And that's why I'm saying we need to go back to the originators of these sciences, of astrology and these things, because they had it right. Don't study the Greek version, which is a facsimile, a bad photocopy. Now, so Venus, Bennu Osar, the resurrection of my divinity. Okay. That is the word for the deity of romance. Romance in Egypt was called that which resurrects my divinity. So to say that I quote unquote love you means I'm resurrecting your divinity as you are mine. I'm awakening your highest, most pure divine energies in a righteous manner as you are for me. People often say, oh, we have all the names of the gods, the planets. In English it's called Venus. In Vedic astrology it's called Shukra, etc. As if they're all equivalent. Don't be fooled by this shenanigan. Let me tell you, the goddess from wherever she's from, Greece, Venus is nothing like Bennu Osar. They're completely different entities. And I find it insulting to mix and match and say they're all the same. It's all Venus. No, it's not. Because nothing in Venus's iconography implies the resurrection of the purest DNA ancestral traits in a person. So that's the number one right there. In order for you to have the experience of a fair and just relationship of two adults coming to a contract expressed openly and clearly, the planet that owns the sign is called the genius of the sign. It is your talent. So signs are our needs, our need for partnership. The planet that owns the sign is your talent for pulling it off. If you have the skills to do it, is shown by the planet. So the talent or genius or skill you need for an equitable adult relationship is your skill for resurrecting the divine in the situation. This demands high initiation. You've got to define what does divine mean, what does resurrect mean. You have to have those words understood to even know what we're talking about. So we're talking about a level of relationship that is so far in advance of the white people's view of love and romance that we're now in a whole different kind of atmosphere, different world altogether. So stay with me, because there is a logic to this realm, to this understanding of relationships. Okay. Now, Bennu Osar also is the deity of culture, joy, and imagery. Culture, joy, imagery. Pleasure, the pleasure principle is Bennu Osar, that it is pleasurable to awaken the divine in you, my dear, my sweet lover, my sweet partner. It is a joy to help awaken your divinity, and it's a joy for me to awaken mine, that it may better help awaken yours. Then you fall into what we could call now romantic love with that act of awakening the divine. What I am saying to you is that the goal of a relationship is to awaken divinity, not to give you a rush, a feeling, a romance, some butterflies in your stomach, or whatever else these white people talk about makes love. No. You follow that path, you're going to go down Divorce Road, heartbreak hotels, all the way down that strip with bloody hearts on the streets. No. The spiritual goal of a relationship is divinity awakening. That can only happen if you know what you're doing from a spiritual angle. And Benoît Sartre also owns imagination, picturing things, meaning the couple must have the same picture or a very similar image of how things should go. That's that contract. For example, you walk into a relationship with someone, you move in, and you have in your mind your subconscious contract or picture of how house cleaning should look, how home chores should be handled. Person A has a picture in their head, person B a picture in their head. You walk in, you each have a picture of how finances should work. You have a picture of how cooking should happen. You have these subconscious contracts in your head, these pictures. And unless you bring it out to the table and say, here's my picture of how house chores should work. Well, here's my picture of how house chores should work. Okay, here's my picture of how finances should work for a couple. Well, here's how I think finances should work. You see? You each are coming in with a set of pictures in your head. And if you don't know that your mate has a very different picture of how cleaning a house should look, you now have the beginning of the opposite sign of the ram, shown here, the ram of a war. War. War will happen here if you don't resurrect and make clear the pictures you have of the contractual needs you have for each other. You understand? If you fail in one sign here, the sign will trigger its opposite to compensate, to correct it, which is here. If you fail in having a contract and you each discussing your pictures as mature adults on the table from the beginning, and then binding each other contractually to agree to work on those together, war will happen. You will start getting a lot of anger and resentment because this god, we call Mahus, the war god, triggers when he feels, number one, not heard, number two, that his boundary has been broken, when he feels violated. So if a person keeps washing the dishes a certain way and it bothers you and you don't talk about this, you will automatically trigger the opposite reaction. The opposite mystery will come on. The ram. You start becoming resentful, and then short, and then rude, and then aggressive, and then belligerent and contentious, and now you're fighting and you're ready for divorce. You can't have left without right. You can have light without dark. You must have the duality of life. And if you keep this side balanced, this side will also be balanced and not bother you. Okay, there's more to the story. I was mentioning there are things that we call vitamins and triggers. Few astrologers know about this dynamic in the zodiac. So not only do you need to have the talent of being able to have the same images of how things should go in the relationship, and the joy of resurrecting the divine in your partner by resurrecting in yourself to share with your partner, Benoît Sartre, there are other planets or talents you need as well. The vitamin for the scales of Libra, what we don't call it Libra, we call it the god Ahimakai, Ahi of the scales. You also need the talents of the planet Tehuti Apshetataui, Jupiter, and Harukapet, Saturn, is exalted in this sign. Let's discuss that. let's start with Saturn being exalted. Exalted means it elevates and perfects that sign. So Harukapet Saturn is a vitamin for the scales. That is the god of hard work, seriousness, maturity, discipline, a plan, timing, astrology charts, knowing your synastry charts and the transits of your mate. It's a lot of hard work, actually. And any of you in long-term bonds or who know those in long-term relationships know that the sky science is not lying. It's a lot of work to maintain a relationship. That's why Ptah, the god of hard work, discipline, order, a plan, structure, death, you've got to die to your lower self. You've got to die to your childish nature. Harukapet Saturn is the god of killing, of death. And you have to die to your childishness and your foolishness to maintain the mystery of these stars in your life, to make the karmas work. So if you don't want to have Harukapet Saturn in your life, you don't want to have hard work, discipline, self-sacrifice, maturity, having a plan. If you don't want to look at your partner's transits and his biorhythms to know when he's up, when he's down, when he's moody, when he's not, if you're not into all that work, then you shouldn't sign up for this contract. Stay a child, stay 4 years old, believe in romance and love conquers all and all that stuff, which is malarkey. Because the scales aren't about unconditional love. They're about how to handle conditional love. Your little list. And agreeing to those conditions in an elegant, mannerable way. Stop following this BS of unconditional love in your relationships. It doesn't exist. It is a fool's journey. It is more difficult, actually, to stay in the contract, to abide by what you signed up for. You understand? So, you need to have Harukapet, the Lord of discipline, hard work, and the understanding that your love life will go through cycles, what's called the transits of your synastry astrology chart. I just said it. Yes, I'll say it again. You have to know your charts of your relationship because they go through seasons of spring, summer, fall, winter, ups and downs, hots and colds. And if you as a couple know, say, oh my goodness, in our synastry chart, we're going through a really horrible time now of Harukapet conjunct Set, which is Saturn conjunct Pluto. That's a very dark time. That's a very tragedy-laced time. That's a very intense time of sickness and perhaps disease. Maybe a lot of losses are coming, whatever. You say, oh my goodness, it's coming up. We had better prepare ourselves. Let's do our rituals, our meditations. Let's protect our finances. Let's begin to store more money in certain accounts. Let's prepare for this. Let's get readings done on this upcoming transit so we're not hit blindsided. And if you do these mature, non-romance, logical, air element, scales approach, you will find it lasts much better. Okay, so the next thing I want to cover is the other vitamin for the scales, which is Tehuti Apshetataui, which you know as Jupiter. But this planet, Jupiter, is the sign of wisdom. He is the lord of oracles and skilled counselors. This means in order for you to have a successful relationship, you need a third party who is a diviner at the highest end of it, if you can get a good diviner who can counsel the couple. And if you can't get that, at least go for a very good marriage counselor. It's saying you need a third external party who can see the whole picture because Tehuti, Apshetataui, Jupiter, controls whole pictures. Who can see the big picture, can see both sides of the situation, and has a higher philosophical understanding of how to navigate the choppy waters of love, of marriage. Every person needs to have an outside counselor, is what I'm saying to you, who is skilled, especially one who has oracles, the African oracles in particular, the high oracles. Let the oracle guide you when it's too tough to know how to guide yourselves. If not an oracle, let your marriage counselor guide you when you can't see how to guide yourselves in that moment. So you need to have hard work, Harukapet Saturn, hard work, discipline, cycles understanding, self-sacrifice, and killing off of your inner childishness. That's Saturn, Harukapet. You need to Hutu Apshetataui, which is Jupiter, which is an outside counselor. You need to have Ben Mosard, which is the love of resurrecting the divine in each other, through a joyous expression of that, by following the contract. And then the opposite here, and this is the finale of this video. You can't have left without right, like I said earlier. That's why I have this symbol here, overlapping the scales. The ram comes first, then the scales. And this is perhaps the most important dynamic that the granary in the sky, the starry granary of wisdom, encoded over millennia by human cultures, tells you. The ram, you see here, says independence. This red or salmon-colored sign here, independence. The ram is about me, me, me. The scales here are about we. But one has to come before the other. And the ram is the first house, the first sign. The scales is the seventh. So clearly, numerically, 1 comes before 7. What does that mean in real terms? It means before you join in a contract with someone, you might want to have something of your own already to bring to the table. You want to be independent on your own. You want to have your own money. You want to have your own skills of inner self-management. You want to have your own life, your own career, your own interest, your own friends. You want to be an independent person, a complete whole, all by yourself. You don't want to walk into partnership hoping the person's going to fulfill in you the missing components of your puzzle. No. Be independent first. Have your own bank, your own job, your own career, your own hobbies, your own interests, your own friends. Have a wonderful life. And be in love with yourself first. Love yourself first. Build yourself first. Don't expect your mate to give you self-esteem and value. No. That's a recipe for a mess. Then your partner should come to the table with stuff already in his bag, in his contract. When you sign a contract, the parties expect each other to bring something already to the table. Then we can share. You understand? So, what do you bring independent of your mate? What do you bring to the table? And that's why the ram is in front of the scales, because he better come first. You better walk through this gate here of these horns before you walk behind the horns, through the horns, into the other gate of these scales. And this is a big problem in the white understanding of relationships. Well, you complete me. You complete me? You don't complete me. I'm already complete. I'm perfect, whole, and complete, actually. I have my own chart. I have my own karmas fulfilled. I know who I am. I know my destiny. I have my own bank. I have got my own coin. I got friends. I'm happy. However, I want to share my happiness, my complete circleness. I'm not a 3/4 circle or 7/8 circle. I'm a 360 circle. Good all by myself. And I want to find someone who's also good all by himself. So we have 2 full circles coming together. Now what happens geometrically when you take 2 circles and you overlap them where their centers meet, you get a kind of vesica piscis in the middle, which looks like the shape of a leaf blade. Yes? Or the lips. One's lips are shaped like this fish shape. that overlap is two holes overlapping. And if you study geometrically the Vesica-Piscis, from that fish shape of two overlapping circles, you can Google this word, Vesica-Piscis of two overlapping circles. Google it, Google images, you'll see it. Inside of that fish shape, you can generate all other shapes in geometry. Every single geometric form can grow out of those lips, grow out of that fish shape. So you create a whole new level of adventure, but you need to have two complete circles overlapping, not one circle which is 3/4 complete, one circle which is 7/8 complete, but 360 meets 360. And the excitement of the overlapping of that creates a whole new geometry in your life. So, be logical. Enter a relationship with your head on your shoulders, not some heart butterflies and some love talk. Have a list of things to measure the person against. Be aware if your list is too crazy. You don't want to have something that's too crazy, too delusional, and expecting, a saint. Make it reasonable. Know which bullets on your list are negotiable and which ones are deal breakers. Hear the other person's same list of negotiables / deal breakers. When you agree to be a partnership, you're agreeing to commit to working on those things in a mature way, like Haruka Pet Saturn demands, to look at each other's cycles, to know when my man is up, when my man is down. I'm not going to push my man when he's down. I'm going to take him out when he's up. Through your biorhythms and your synastry astrology transit charts, which is a science that is so lacking, so many problems would be solved in relationships if you knew when your man was up and down. It's that simple. You don't kick a person down. You don't bring up heavy, serious, volatile issues when they're running crazy biorhythms and dangerous transits. You wait. That's why Ptah, Haruka Pet, Saturn is about waiting and patience, a thing that only adult, mature people can pull off. You want to make sure you have an outside wise counselor to help you for those things that you can't see for yourselves because you're too much in the mix of it. You want to first come to the table as independent wholes, 360s, and then overlap your resources, your talents, your interests, your friendships, your partner's interests, and then share those to create a whole new geometry in that Vesica-Piscis. And you see here, by following this pattern shown by the zodiac, and I've only done this axis, this salmon colored, green colored axis, but I could go into more, which I won't do at this time. I'll give you a hint, for example. If you want to know what is the wealth of a relationship, well, the second house always is the wealth house. So if I pretend this 7 becomes 1, I say, let's say this is 1 now. The second would be this one, the Scorpion. So the second from the 7th, the second from the scales, this is the scales is 1, this is the second, is the Scorpion. The Scorpion is trials met together. The wealth, the second house in principle is always the wealth or the value of something. All second positions act like the second house, the bull. So this is second, 8 is second from 7th. It is Scorpion, but it will act like the bull. So your marriage's value, its wealth, is that you shared tough times together. The Scorpion is about crisis and facing the dark shadow within us, our fears. And when you face your fear together, you sharing that moment of a tragedy or illness or a hard thing to learn, and you have someone by your side that binds you, it makes the relationship more valued. It increases its value. A relationship's happiness is 5th from the scale. So the scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the water bearer. What makes the relationship have fun, I should say not happiness but fun, is fifth house is the number 5 always is the sign of fun in the zodiac. This is the sign of desires, hopes, wishes, dreams, friends, and causes. When the couple have the same dreams, the same hopes, the same desires, they have fun pursuing them together. When they have friends that get along, it keeps the relationship fun. When they believe in the same causes in the world, it keeps the relationship fun. What drains relationships? What sucks away the joy of relationships? 12th is the draining house. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Here, the wheat of Virgo. This is the sign of debt. Debt, money problems are the natural drainers of marriages. Financial issues are, by divine law of the starry vault of heaven, the forces whose job it is to drain a relationship, to ruin it. You know what I'm saying if you've been in long-term bonds. Money problems are some of the fastest ways to ruin a relationship. So you look at this, we learned about the vitamins, the talent, the lordship, the opposite, how that plays in. We're learning how, if you look and you start counting from the scales to get more information, and I can go on and on and on and on and on with this, which I will do over time publicly for YouTube here, to teach you the laws of whatever you're looking at. The 10th house is your career. There are laws to a successful career. The 2nd house is your money, your assets. There's a law to that. We're going to cover all of these things in due time, and how to use this mandala of the shamans of the Golden Beetle. My gay shamans use this to decode anything in nature. Any problem in life can be understood if you analyze it from this mandala, from this magic wheel, from this unified field dynamic. All you have to study in life is this little wheel. There's nothing more to study in life. That's a big statement. It's a somewhat dramatic statement. And it is a true statement. Every mystery, every question about life has already been answered and left as a cheat sheet in this simple 12-fold wheel. So, I wish you all happy relationships. I want to see my gay brothers having wonderful long-term relationships, minus the heartache, the unnecessary heartache, minus the wounds, minus the foolishness, that you may all create good karmas in the scales. One of the words for constellations in ancient Egyptian also means to watch. That the stars are watching you, the universe is aware of you, the vacuum is conscious of you. And according to the African science of the sky, as taught in the Golden Beetle, the scales in your chart, the Libra in your chart, is watching you and recording your karmas with it, and creating future karmas based upon how you handled Ahimakai, the god of this sign. So may you all have those wonderful karmas of mature. I really do wish for you the beauty of a mature relationship. It's much more fulfilling than that childish love song Romeo and Juliet mess. They killed themselves. Come on. They ended up as suicidal, crazy teenagers. Is that an ideal to look at? If it is, you must be a white culture person. I'll die for love. No, I won't. I certainly will not die for love. Stop thinking unconditional. Think conditional and be successful at keeping your word. Air signs are your word. Keeping to the contract and being mature enough to fulfill the demands even if you don't want to. So, may true love bloom in the gay community. Dwawend Hotepu.